Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle.
I mean, we are in two illegal wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, now expanding into Pakistan, and the troops out there don't want to do it. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be killing people. They don't want to be sleeping in ditches and eating MREs. They're doing it because they think they're doing it for the American people, who support them and back them up 100%. Until we start hearing something different, how are we going to know to resist? The reason I resisted Iraq is because somebody looked at me in the face a long time ago and said, you know what, Joe, these wars are genocidal, and American soldiers participating in them is every bit as bad as Nazi soldiers participating in World War II. And I was so mad, I was so angry. I almost punched this guy in the head. I was like, how dare you say something like that about my army and about my brothers and sisters in uniform? How dare you accuse us of something so horrible? I was angry, but it stuck with me. And it kept coming back up in my head as I watched the death mount, the destruction mount, the racist rhetoric mount. It kept coming back to me. And I kept wondering, are we fighting terrorists? No, we're not fighting terrorists. We're fighting people, regular old people over there, starving, living in poverty, not with a lot anyway. They may be pissed off at the U.S. now. Does that mean we have the right to kill them? No, not at all. Death is not a solution to terror. We cannot kill ourselves out of this problem.
Matthis, when were you in the military?
Well, I was in the Army on active duty from 2002 through 2007. Then I was discharged to the individual ready reserves, where I was called up from in 2008. I refused deployment in Congress after Winter Soldier on the Hill, and I ended up fighting a public defense campaign in the U.S. because I refused to leave. I refused to go into hiding. And
you say deployment to Iraq?
Deployment to Iraq, although I would have refused to go to Afghanistan as well. They're both illegal, racist wars built on lies. And yeah, so I resisted that deployment. I was discharged, and since then I've continued committing myself to the struggle. Just because I'm out doesn't mean everybody else is out. It doesn't mean the Iraqi people and the Afghan people are out. This struggle's got to continue from all people of good conscience who love democracy and peace. This struggle must continue.
Some people say, well, Iraq was the wrong war, but Afghanistan was the right war because bin Laden was there and we have to fight the Taliban and all that. What do you think about that?
Number two.
Well, I think it's pretty asinine to think that if we don't kill them over there, that they are going to come home and kill us here. I guess they're going to come across the ocean in their rubber rafts with their AK-47s and somehow destroy our country. I think it's crap. I think racism is truly what is driving these wars, not a need to forge security for this nation over there. We're not killing terrorists and insurgents. We're killing Iraqi and Afghan citizens who are tired of being occupied. Especially you look at Afghanistan. That country's been occupied now pretty much continually for the past 30 years. The problem in Afghanistan is not a lack of occupation. The problem is an excess of an occupation. I believe if the Afghan people were given the right to self-determination, they could make the right decisions for themselves and can build a country for themselves. We absolutely owe them countless amounts of support in that, in the form of reparations paid through aid.
If we come together.
The thing is, though, people have this idea that we have our first black president, we've entered this post-racial era in the United States. And so when Obama speaks about we need to continue this war, people feel like it must be coming from a different place than it was for Bush. Well, Obama's making arguments like we can't give the Afghan people and the Iraqi people self-determination because if we did, they wouldn't build anything for themselves. Or they'd just kill each other. Or worse, they'd organize and come back and kill us. And these arguments to me are so flawed because they're the exact same arguments made by white slave slave owners in the 1800s trying to justify continuing slavery. They said, we can't free the slaves, they won't build anything for themselves, or they'll come back and kill us, or they'll kill each other. Well, they were freed, and 100 years of violence did ensue, which claimed thousands and thousands of lives. To this day, nobody would argue the slaves should have remained in bondage one day longer to prevent that. I believe that people of Afghanistan and the people of Iraq have a right to freedom and self-determination every bit as much as the slaves did in the 1800s here in the United States.
Let me ask you about the Army itself. There's a lot of young people. They see the commercials on TV. It looks like something very exciting. They're offered all kinds of money. What would you say to an 18-year-old who has been looking at the Army or the military?
All this flooding and all.
Well, I would ask him how he enjoys being tortured. Because that's what the U.S. military is. It is torture to the people within it, to the people outside of it that we are occupying, to the communities that we are destroying. The U.S. Army is torture. So I would ask that kid, how much would the military...
What do you mean torture within it?
Well, it's torture to be in the Army. The Army tortures people. The Army tortures its own soldiers to make its own soldiers think it's okay to torture other people. So I'm talking about emotional torture, physical torture, sexual torture, any way they can find to make you suffer, they will. And that is the military experience. It is not one of honor, it is not one of glory, it is one of dehumanization, torture, rape, and murder. And none of those things give somebody the right to go to college. None of those things ought to give somebody the right to get health care. Those things ought to be basic human rights anyway. So, yeah, I speak to high school students a lot. I speak to college students a lot. And I tell them, they'll come to you and they'll promise you the stars and they'll promise you the world if you join the military. What they are really asking you is how much for me to torture you. And that's what it is. It's torture. And I experienced it, and nobody else should have to.
Final question. I see your shirt says Iraq Veterans Against the War. Are you part of that organization?
I am. I'm actually on the board of directors. I've been a member for a year and a half now. I actually refused to deploy to Iraq in great part because I was exposed to the Winter Soldier testimonies that Iraq Veterans Against the War put on in Maryland. It's an extremely powerful organization. The voices of the troops decrying the occupations that they were carrying out does hold the key to ending these wars. We've just got to start sending real messages of peace to the soldiers, and that doesn't include keep going, guys, we support you. That includes some hard truths. And those are the truths that our boys need to be hearing, just like I needed to hear for me to make the decisions I did.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.